Alright, hello everyone. It's been a long time since I've done a video. My next video series is going to be on AM broadcasting. Since I've done FM extensively, I'm now going to look into AM broadcasting, or I'm going to explain it. I'm not looking into it. I've already got a very good setup here. So, to start out my series on AM broadcasting, we're going to look at antennas first. Now, for AM, the best antennas that you can use, as an amateur, somebody that is not wanting to spend a ton of money on a setup, the best antennas you can use are either inverted V or inverted L. The easiest one to do is inverted L, which is what this is. The problem with inverted V is it has to be very, very long. Has to be about 200 feet long, approximately, at a minimum, for the top of the AM broadcast band. This inverted L here is about 135 feet long, so that's at the top of the AM band. If you want to go lower, it's going to have to be a little longer. So basically what I have here is, you can see this pole. This is called the spider beam. This spider beam goes up vertically about 70 feet, and then the wire comes down, you probably can't see it, and goes to that smaller pole held up by that ladder. So here, let's go take a look at it. Okay, so here's a couple of guy lines right here. These guy lines are simply nylon rope going to the spider beam. And so I've got two here, and then I've got two down there, two there, and then all the way over there I've got two more. Excuse the zoom and the camera quality, I'm doing my best here. I don't have a gimbal or anything like that. So let's go down here and check it out. Alright, so here's the base of the antenna. That's an old antenna wire that was taken off. Don't use that one anymore. There's the actual antenna wire right there. So you can see that the coax right here, you can see this coax. This is LMR 240 coax. And this is a 7/16 DIN connector right here. That's what you see right here. A DIN male and a DIN female panel mount connector. Okay, so I've got this kind of connector because it's very, very good for outdoors. It's got a good seal inside of it. It's got a very good gasket inside of it. You could also use an N connector, but I don't recommend using a UHF connector like a PL259 because that kind of connector is probably going to get some water in it. It doesn't have as good of a seal. So an N connector or a 7/16 DIN connector like this is probably the best. So the setup of an inverted L is relatively simple. And right here, I've got the bare minimum. This is the bare minimum here. So what you need for a bare minimum setup inverted L for medium wave band is you need one coil going to ground. So basically what happens here is the inner part of the coax, or the positive, goes to the top of this coil. You can see the wire right there. See, it goes in there from where the coax is. It goes to that top connector, which is the antenna. That's the antenna up there. And then see, there's a branch that goes down into the coil, and then the wheel of the coil goes to ground. So the wheel of the coil is connected to that cable right there. You see that black cable? That's the ground connection. Okay? So it's just going through part of the coil up until it hits the wheel there. And then the wheel is shorting it to ground. Okay? So this is a tunable inductor. It's from an old Johnson transmitter. You can find these relatively cheap on eBay. So I think this is like 40 bucks or something like that. So yeah, this is the positive of the antenna up here. Goes through here, goes to that wheel, and then goes to ground. So it's called a shunt inductor. Down here, it's hard to get that low, but see this? That's a little wheel. That's how you turn it. You tune it with that wheel. That turns this whole thing, and this wheel moves up and down on here. So you can, I'm getting bitten by mosquitoes here. So you can choose exactly where you want this wheel, and that will tune the antenna for the best SWR. Because the idea with this type of inverted L is, even if you cut this wire to the exact right length, you can see it going all the way up there. Even if you cut this wire to the exact right length for your frequency, it's still not going to be a super low SWR. You're still going to have some problems getting it tuned up. You can't just connect this coax to this, even if it's perfect. See, with higher frequencies, like a ground plane antenna, which this is, if you had a quarter wave ground plane antenna in VHF, for example, you wouldn't need to tune it. You wouldn't need to have an inductor like this. Not exactly sure why that is, but when you have a much bigger antenna like this, and you've got a huge ground plane under this whole area, that makes it so that you have to have some type of tuning. You don't have to have a full ham tuner, as a lot of people think you have to have a full-fledged tuner with a pi network and two inductors and a capacitor, or two capacitors and an inductor. You don't need that. You just need one inductor, so long as you make the antenna the exact right length. If the antenna is not cut to the exact right length, then you will need a full tuner. But if you can get the antenna exactly right, then you just need one. You just need one coil right here. So yeah, so the bottom of this coil there, you can see the ground. That comes out and it splits into two separate lines. I did that just for redundancy, just in case one of them gets corroded or messed up. It'll have redundancy. But both of these lines are connecting to the same ground plane. So down here, I don't know if you can see it. See that it's got some really beefy alligator clips on there, and they connect to the ground plane right there. So basically how this ground plane is, see all those wires down there wrapped around there? So it's very kludgy how I did this, but it works out just fine. So this is a PVC tube, and all I did was I took a bunch of wires and went under this whole field. So each wire is about 120 feet long, roughly. Ideally, you want the ground plane to be the same length as the antenna itself, and the antenna itself is about 135. So I'm skimping a little bit on the ground plane, but not much. So these are about 120 feet. They go under here, and there's about probably about 35 of them, and they all wrap around this thing, and I twisted the ends all around this, and then the twisted parts are what is connected to these clips here. In addition to the ground plane wires, I also have a mesh under the ground here that's made out of chicken fence. So you might be able to see some of it right there. See that chicken fence wire? That's under this whole area here, about 10 by 10 feet. So there's also about 10 by 10 feet of chicken wire like that under all of this grass right here. Okay, so that's basically what I have for the antenna, and then I got like a little connector here like for audio. It's for audio equipment, but it works fine for RF frequencies this low. So I just screw this in here, and that's the antenna. And so the antenna goes all the way up this spider beam right here. This is the spider beam. See, it says spider beam. It goes all the way up here, alongside it, all the way up to the top there, and there's a pulley up there. There's a little pulley up there to make sure that it can slide through there. So now let's go look at the other end here. We're going to walk down here. 10 by 10 square of chicken fence under there. Okay? And then over here, there's one part of the one section of the chicken fence wire actually extends out all the way under here. So there's a thin strip of it that goes all the way under this section, the section that is under the antenna wire right here, just to provide additional grounding directly underneath the antenna itself. So you can't really see the chicken fence wire, but it is under this area. There's the antenna right there. So it goes under here, and let's check out the end of the antenna. Okay, so here's the extra rolled up chicken fence right here. So you can see this is where it ends. So here is my crude setup here. It's just a ladder. Okay, I got a ladder, and I got some lead bricks on there. These are really heavy. They keep it down really good. And then I got one normal brick. And then inside of the ladder, I have this tube. It goes up through a hole in the top of the ladder. This tube is a military antenna. It's a military antenna pole, basically. And so it's got these segments right here. So I can take out sections to tune the antenna. So basically how I tune this antenna is I raise and lower this end part. You can see right there. There's a rope right there. And that rope goes to an insulator. Okay? So that rope goes to that insulator. Alright? And so by raising and lowering this pole right here, that changes the tuning, the resonant frequency of the antenna by about 100 kilohertz. So basically what you do is you get the antenna approximately the right length. Then you tune it by either raising or lowering this, or turning the inductor at the base of the antenna over there. So those are the two ways to tune it. So after you get it roughly close to the right frequency, using by cutting the length of the antenna, once it's close enough, then you can tune it by simply raising and lowering this part here, or by tuning that thing over there. Now, this will alter the frequency a lot more than turning the inductor will. By turning the inductor, basically you're just making sure that the antenna is matched at 50 ohms. It'll be exactly at 50 ohms. But in order to actually change the resonant frequency of the antenna relatively drastically, by about 100 kilohertz, that's how you do it. You use this. This is the one that changes it more. The other one just sort of brings the SWR down. So what you do here is you get this thing to where you want it roughly. Then you raise and lower this, and it's opposite of how you would think. If you raise this part, the frequency goes down. If you lower this part, the frequency goes up. So the lower the tip, the end of the inverted L, the lower it is, the higher the frequency. So it's inverted. It's the opposite of what you would think. So that's how you do it. And this thing has covered thousands of miles. So this setup works extremely well. So I really recommend, if you're trying to build a broadcasting station, don't go with FM. FM is really not the kind of thing you want to go with at this point, because that's how I put it in the ground. I'm not sure why this thing is so washed out. Why is this getting so washed out now? Okay. So if you want to build the best type of AM broadcasting antenna, this is how you should do it. You can try other types. You can try an inverted V. You can try a full-length dipole. But I've come to find that doing it that way doesn't really work as well because you have to get the antenna up so high in the air, and you have to have three different supports, one for the middle of the antenna and one for the two ends, which is really, really hard to do. But with this antenna, got some type of animal over here. I hear a lot of rustling back there. It's kind of freaking me out a bit. But anyway, yeah, so this type of antenna for AM broadcasting is the best. I've tried all the other ones, and I did my best to get them up as high as possible, but like I said, they require three supports, and, you know, just a pain in the ass to tune because they're super long, you know, over 200 feet. This thing is only 135 feet, and like I said, only 70 of these feet actually has to go vertical, and the rest is horizontal. So makes it a lot easier, works incredibly well. It has a great skywave signal. The skywave signal is amazing. And the spider beam is not very expensive. I mean, it's kind of expensive, but when you think about putting up an AM broadcasting antenna for like well under $1,000, something that can cover thousands of miles, it's definitely worth it. And I would say if you're thinking about broadcasting and you're trying to set up an FM station, if you have the land, don't do FM, do AM. There's many reasons why. Not only will you cover a lot more people, but you won't get caught. It's very unlikely for people to get caught without a license on AM because AM broadcasting, nobody really monitors it that much. It's kind of like old and forgotten. It travels incredibly far. You can even do stereo if you want. You can make AM sound as good as FM if you really want to. It's possible using CQAM. So if I were starting out and I had the room to put up a real antenna like this field right here is from there to there is probably about 100 feet. From all the way that end to, ow, more bug bites, to over here is probably 135. So you don't need that much space. I mean, you need a decent sized field, but it doesn't have to be like a complete farm. So this really is doable. If you have the space, I would definitely go with AM instead of FM. So this is how you do it. So the next part in this series is going to be looking at AM broadcast transmitters, explaining how they work, explaining how to build one, and giving you sources for places where you can buy AM broadcast transmitters for really cheap. One more thing I forgot to mention is that little area by the insulator gets incredibly high voltages on it. The voltages there get seriously high, and it will form a corona, and sparks will shoot out of it, and it will sound like a Tesla coil, and you can actually hear it. So when I do a little demonstration here, you'll be able to hear the music shooting out sparks from that end right there. It's really amazing. So that's about it for this video. I hope I covered everything, and I hope you stay tuned for the next one.